Shalom, everyone. Today we're in the fourth chapter of Shoftim, or Judges. Last week we read about the rise of a couple of the Shoftim of ancient Israel. The last one we read about was Ehud and Shamgar. The last two we read about, son of Anak, who killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad, and he too rescued Israel. Was where we left off. It says, but after Ehud had died, this is really what we see happening as a pattern. After Ehud had died, the people of Israel again did what was evil from Yehovah's perspective. We talked about that last week. It is so easy to do what is evil from Yehovah's perspective and to think that we are doing right. Okay? Because we allow society, we allow familial tradition, we allow influences that are not holy and sanctified. We allow them to convince us that certain things are right and okay. And there are two extremes on this. And I just had this debate with a local mainline preacher this week. I love the man to death. I'm not speaking ill of him, but his position was on a certain topic. He said, the Bible doesn't actually say this, but it alludes to it, so I teach it. And I cautioned him, and I said, be very careful, because the Bible is not something, just as much as we don't want to take out of the Bible and say, well, we're not going to honor that anymore, which most of the mainline churches do. I said, at the same time, we don't want to add to the Bible. Okay, and there I gave him two passages of Scripture, one at the end of Deuteronomy, one at the end of Revelation, that said if you add to or take away from the text to make your own meaning, then you'll be cursed. Okay, and all the curses and all the plagues of the volume will be poured out upon you and your people. We have to be very careful that as we make our choices, whether they be independent choices, familial choices, as we're leading our families, whether they're congregational choices, we have to make sure that what we're doing is in keeping with what Scripture says, that we're not adding to or taking from. Now, it doesn't actually say here what they did, but in order for it to not be pleasing to him, in order for it to be evil in Yehovah's perspective, they had to have either added to or taken from his word. It says, so Yehovah handed them over to Yavin, king of Canaan. He ruled from Hatzor, and the commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. The people of Israel cried out to Yehovah because he had 900 iron chariots, and for 20 years he cruelly oppressed the people of Israel. Now, Devorah, I think my daughters, when they asked me to teach on this book, didn't you say that you wanted to read the story of Deborah? Okay, that's the English for Deborah. Okay, so this is the story you were asking about specifically. A woman and a prophet. I love that translation. I do. Because most translations say she was a prophetess. And the mainliners, even a lot of Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews will tell you that a prophetess is less in stature than a prophet. Okay? Now it's true that according to the scriptural outline, we can't have a female priest. There's no priestess in Israel. Okay, we can't have a female rabbi. Okay, there's no raha. There's no feminine to that. Okay, but there are offices which a woman is allowed to hold, and that they hold in the same stature, so to speak, as the men who hold them. Okay, repeatedly in the Brit Hadesh, the feminine form of diakonos is used to describe some of the women who served under Shaul. And people say, well, there's a deacon and there's a deaconess, and the deacons are more important than the deaconesses, and there's nothing in Scripture that tells us that. Okay, there's a difference in that office for a reason. Okay, prophet is one of those offices that there is never in Scripture given an indication that a woman who has the gift is of any less stature than a man who has the gift. That you should listen to the man who prophesies rather than the woman who prophesies. Prophecy is simply a gift of the Spirit. It says she was a woman and a prophet, the wife of Lapido. She was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under Deborah's palm between Ramah and Baal in the hills of Ephraim. And the people of Israel would come to her for judgment. She sent for Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Yehovah has given you this order. Now that's something, when you have a prophet, when you have someone who literally speaks the word of Elohim for Elohim, when that person comes to you, I don't care if that person is male, is female, is black or white or purple. Okay? I don't care what you, in the back of your mind, have this stereotype of that person. When that person comes to you and says, I am a prophet, Yehovah has given you this order, you better listen to what they have to say. You better take it very seriously, especially if the body of like believers, the body of first, the messianic body, has recognized that person as having a gift, and they come to you and say, you're being given this order by the creator of the universe, you better sit up and listen. Go, march to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the people of Naphtali and Zebulun. I will call Sisera, the commander of Yavin's army, to encounter you at the Kishon River with his chariots and troops, and I will hand him over to you. That's very specific. You know, one of the things, and we used to attend for a season. Before we had the synagogue, we attended a local church. They were not mainline. They had been Pentecostal, and they kind of moved away from that and got more into the Hebrew roots, and they kept Shabbat to the best of their understanding, and they ate kosher to the best of their understanding. And that was the closest we could come to finding Messianic fellowship at the time. But they had this woman who they believed was a prophet. Okay? And I'm not saying that she had never been given a message, because some of the things that she was given early on were very clear, were very specific, and held very true to Torah. But as she got older, years passed, and they became more and more dependent upon her rather than just digging into the Word, which is what she was originally calling them to. Some of the things she came up with later, I would say, show me that in Torah, and nobody could. And I would say, I can show you 5 places or 6 places or whatever that say the opposite, so I'm not going to follow that. Okay? And so here's a danger that we can fall into that obviously was not happening here, because this was a very specific thing. You're being given an order today by Elohim to raise your army from these two tribes, 10,000 men from these two tribes. You're going to go down to this place. You're going to encounter this army, this general, and Elohim was going to hand them over to you. That is very specific. There is no vagueness. There is nothing here that could be like, unfortunately, in that church, there were things she would give a quote-unquote prophecy, and they would say, oh, well, it's going to happen on this day, and this is going to happen, and it wouldn't happen. And they say, well, we must have miscalculated. It must mean this time in the future, or it must be, okay. And they were getting so far off track, and we were trying, those of us who understood the fall there, the thinking there, were trying to draw them back, and there became a lot of friction there. But the fact is, prophecy, in order to be proven as prophecy, must be specific, not vague. Vague, quote-unquote, prophecies can be interpreted 15 different ways sometimes. Specific prophecy either comes true or doesn't. And if it doesn't, then it's not really prophecy. Barak answered her, if you go with me, I'll go. What a brave man, let me tell you. Clad in his armor, I can just see him, clad in his armor, all of his weapons at the ready. He has 900 iron chariots and an entire, or I'm sorry, I was going against the 900 iron chariots. Has clad in his armor, has his weapons ready. These men are ready to rise up and fight against these men with 900 chariots. He's ready to go to war with him. He says, woman, he didn't say that, but that's really what he was saying. He said, woman, if you go with me, I'll go. Shame on him. We're going to see what happens as a result. Now, I am not one of the extremists who say that no woman should ever serve in the military. But I am called a sexist because I say that there are specific military jobs that no woman is supposed to do. Okay? I don't have a problem with a woman being a military nurse. I don't have a problem with a woman helping coordinate logistics, okay, for the military. But the second that a woman is put in harm's way, is sent into battle, shame on the society that does that. That is not a godly model. We see here, this woman was basically, she was judge, so she was basically general of the generals. Shame on this man for requiring her to go to battle with him for him to go. I don't care if he was saying, I know wherever you go, Elohim will be. Shame on him for not trusting the creator of the universe and saying, okay, I'm going to go. She replied, or sorry, but if you won't go with me, I won't go, was the rest of what he said. She replied, yes, I will gladly go with you. You ever think Deborah was more of a man than Barak? Think about that. But the way you are doing it will bring you no glory. But you know what? You are going to go down in history as the general who liberated Israel from this foreign king. Instead, you're going to go down in history as the general who wouldn't fight without the woman going in front of him. Because Yehovah will hand Sisera over to a woman. Then Deborah set out and went with Barak to Kadesh. Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali to come to Kailash. 10,000 men followed him, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber and Kenai had cut himself off from the rest of Canaan, the descendants of Hobab, Moshe's father-in-law. He had pitched his tent near the oak of Zanim, which is close to Kadesh. Sisera was informed that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera rallied his chariots, all 900 iron chariots, and all the troops he had with him from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River. Devorah said to Barak, "Get going. This is the day when Yehovah will hand Sisera over to you. Yehovah has gone out ahead of you." So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. And Yehovah threw Sisera, all his chariots, and his entire army into a panic before Barak's sword, so that Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army all the way to Harosheth Hagoyim. Sisera's entire army was put to the sword, not one man was left. However, Sisera ran on foot to the tent of Yael, the wife of Heber, the Kenite, because there was peace between Yavin, the king of Hatzor, and the family of Heber, the Kenite. Yael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come in, my lord, stay here with me, and don't be afraid." So he went into her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. He said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink. I'm thirsty." She opened a goat skin of milk, gave him some to drink, and covered him up again. Now here's something to think about, and this was brought out. Lisa asked me last night. She had always wondered why, if he had peace and friendship with this family, is what's about to happen. Why could it happen? Okay, and initially it looks like she's treating him like a friend. "Come in, I'll hide you. I'll cover you with this blanket. You want water? I'll give you milk. You know, whatever. I will be a great hostess to you." But if you read it, it doesn't actually say that he had a friendship with this woman's husband. It says that the king he served had a friendship with this woman's husband. There's a difference there. Now, granted, this man represented the king that the woman's husband had a friendship with. But check this out. What had this man just done? This man had just led that king's mighty army to an absolute defeat. Every man under him had been put to the sword, and he was fleeing as a coward. And when I reread this stuff this morning, and I was looking at it, and I thought, it may well be that this woman and her husband may have felt that they were doing a just duty to the king. Here is this man who led your mighty army, your 900 iron chariots, into a disastrous battle, lost a battle they never should have lost. Short of the miraculous intervention of Elohim, they could not have lost that battle. But they lost the battle, they lost the chariots, they lost the horses, they lost the weapons. Every man was put to death right on the doorstep of the capital, and the general fled like a coward. She opened the goatskin of milk, gave him something to drink, and covered him up again. He said to her, "Stand at the entrance of the tent, and if anyone asks you if somebody is here, say no." He sent the woman, and I know Barak was just as bad. He sent the woman in front of him. Sisera sent Yael to the door to protect him. This was not a manly man. How he ascended to the rank of general of anything, I don't know. But when he was deeply asleep, Yael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and a hammer in her hand, crept into him quietly, and drove the tent peg into his temple, right through to the ground. so that he died without waking up. So here is Barak pursuing Sisera, and Yael steps out to meet him and says, "Come, I will show you the man you are looking for." He goes into her tent, and there is Sisera, lying dead with a tent peg through his temple. Thus, Elohim, on that day, you notice it's the exact day that the prophet, the female prophet, said he would be delivered. On that day, Elohim defeated Yavin, the king of Canaan, in the presence of the people of Israel. Notice he didn't just overthrow them, he made sure there was an army. 10,000 members of the nation of Israel saw this miraculous thing happen. The hand of the people of Israel came down more and more heavily against Yavin, the king of Canaan, until they had completely destroyed Yavin, the king of Canaan. So they didn't stop fighting that day. They overthrew his army that day, and they continued the fight. But once the army was gone, Israel had the army, Yavin had nothing, no one to defend the cities, and it was only a matter of time before those cities fell. We have a midrash. Yes.
I think it's I agree with Barak was a coward for not doing that, but this is something I thought about because there's a lot of when we talked about before, there's a lot of importance on the name we give children, and whoever gave him that name, I think cursed him from birth, basically.
Oh, because of the meaning, yeah.
Because of the meaning, it means a curse that persecutes the voice.
Yep.
And
it does.
Kind of, if you think about it in a way, I mean, granted, he could have overcame that, but that's kind of like a curse. He was already cursed to be a coward. Or as soon as he was given the name.
I don't know that he was necessarily cursed to be a coward, but he was set up because the power of when a father gives a name to a child, there is power in that name, and it can go whatever way. And it can be, I mean, like, that all of my children's names are basically Hebrew prayers.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for a purpose because even when Yaakov was born, I knew the power of a name, that it meant something. And I believe that you're right. Barak does mean a curse which first appears to be a blessing. It's like a mixed blessing, quote unquote. It's a bittersweet thing. And I see. I see what you're saying. He was set up. He looked like a blessing. He was this great, mighty warrior general, and he ascended to generalship, and then became a curse. Yes. I knew you were going there. I was thrown out of a church and told never to come back when he was running for president the first time, and I stood in front of the congregation. I said, "Far be it from me to tell you how to vote. There's one individual in this election who has a Hebrew name, and that Hebrew name means a curse, which first appears to be a blessing. Now you vote your conscience." Yeah, I was never invited back.
Anyway,
I was talking about first name, but go ahead.
Well, second thing, I think you're probably right to a certain degree about Sisera, although I think that he, when you have 900 chariots, and, he basically watched his army get completely decimated. And it's because of his power. So my thought is, even the strongest warrior, when they see the army with basically like war machines, the eye of war machines at the time get completely decimated by foot soldiers. I think it would be kind of hard not to just be like completely like shocked at that point and flee, because is it because he didn't I mean, if it's really Otto that did it, tell him to do it, then it wouldn't matter how good of a general he was, or how well he strategically attacked and stuff. You just got, decimated.
I understand what you're saying, but there's a time when you draw a line, and part of that warrior mentality is that you're going to do what's right for the people, not what's right for you.
Right.
And I'm thinking of a time when I worked over at corrections, we had an active shooter drill that nobody but the director, even the assistant director, did not know it was a drill. We were told that there was actually an active shooter in the building. When that emergency call went out, exactly 3 people on staff, including myself, actually did what we were supposed to do. Everybody else got themselves out of the building and left with people in lockdown to possibly be, slaughtered. And 3 of us got over 100 people out of the building safely before we took care of ourselves. And I remember certain individuals telling us that we were crazy to stay in the building if we thought there was an active shooter. And then there were other people, and ironically, it was for the most part people who had been in the military who were in county government who were like, no, they did, they made the hard call. They got the defenseless people who didn't have the opportunity to just run, to make sure that they got out. I know to this day that those 2 other guys that stayed in the building with me and got everybody out. I let them have my back in any fight, in any bad situation. And the other people that fled, no.
Do they know what they were supposed to do? Or
We had all been in training. We had been through training several months before in case something like that happened. And exactly, and not everybody on staff was working that day, so I can't speak to that. But of the people who were there, I know who I would trust in a bad situation. And sadly, there were only 2 of them. Yes. What did they train you with?
And I've told them before, we need to kind of training because we got all these little kids.
Well, I would tell you don't go to the bathroom because that's what we call a suicide box. You set yourself up in a position where, even just they don't even have to take shots. Take aim because the bullets are going to ricochet and hit somebody. So I would encourage you to go to them again and say we need training. And right now, when they're on summer break, would be the perfect time to do that because you could walk through and do your
they
training.
don't have a plan in time to do
Even like us, okay, we don't have to put out anything there. If something happens, we don't know how to do balancing out, you don't know any of that stuff.
You should. Anybody else on Midrash? No?